Hi, Cindy.
Good morning.
Hello, Jeff and company.
Good morning. Morning, everybody. Looks like we're waiting for a few folks to get on. Just got a couple minutes here before we get rolling.
Mandy and April, I went ahead and I made you co-host just in case you needed to share your screen.
Thank you.
Okay, it's looking like our council's coming on. We've got everyone here. I'm seeing as well our city manager, our city clerk. Looks like we're ready to go. Cindy, how are we doing in terms of getting ready to start at 9?
Sounds good.
Okay, very good. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. I want to welcome everybody to the City of St. Helena Special City Council meeting Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. And Cindy, would you give us a little help with the remote instructions, please?
Sure. So on the agenda, the meeting ID and phone number to call in is listed. And so that's how the public can join.
Thank you very much. And also, we continue to remind folks that simultaneous Spanish interpretation services during meetings can be scheduled upon request. Requests must be made at least 72 hours in advance by calling the city clerk at 707-968-2640 or emailing cityclerk@cityofsthelena.org. We'll go first, before, I don't see the pledge on here, but I want to do that. So if folks would mute your microphones, please, and just follow with me on the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then we'll move to our roll call, please.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Here.
Councilmember Hardy,
Here.
Toe,
Here.
and Hall.
Here.
Okay, we'll move now to our adoption of the agenda. My understanding from staff is that we'd like to see the order here flipped around. We have one item, which is 5.1. There are two components to it. Actually, since it is just one item, we can have that discussion once we get into the item. So what I'll do is look to the city clerk to see if there are any other changes to the agenda.
There are none.
Okay, and so we'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
I'll move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. So we'll move to public comment. This is a special meeting under California law. Public comments at special meetings are limited to subjects on the agenda only. Therefore, public comment will take place during consideration of the item, and each person's comment shall be limited to 4 minutes. So we'll open public comment as we get into the item. We have one item today. This is new business, consideration and award of nonprofit grant application funding through the nonprofit grant program in the fiscal year 2022-23. Operations budget in the amount of $135,085 and approval of resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a multi-year nonprofit funding agreement with Boys and Girls Club, Rianda House Senior Center, and Up Valley Family Centers in the amount of $30,000 each for a total of $90,000 per year. We are going to be led into this by Dr. Mitz and Mandy Kellogg, our administrative services director. I'll look to Jim McCann, our city manager, to see if there's any comments from him at this point before we get into the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Good morning, all, and all who are on the Zoom call. This is a really exciting agenda. A lot of really good services provided, really perfect example of public-private partnership to serve the needs of the community. And I think it's a very wise move to separate these three, which are ongoing activities, very direct partnership with the city, and a little bit more substantial in some of the funding and ongoing commitments. And so the idea of separating them from the other groups does make sense to me. And I'll let Mandy and April walk through the specific requests and recommendations.
Mr. McCann, I just have one comment I want to make before we get started. And I do want to remind folks, everybody who's participated or submitted applications, we are still dealing with COVID, post-COVID sort of environment. And so that informs monies available, how monies are dispersed. I just want to keep everybody's expectations understanding that we're still in a circumstance a bit compromised by COVID in terms of our ability to do everything we want to do. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start with just a brief kind of background here. Based on direction received during the fiscal year 21-22 nonprofit funding review process, city staff reviewed the existing grant guidelines and application to identify opportunities to incorporate City Council Goal 5 to support thriving families and enhance the safety, well-being, and healthy development of our youth, and City Council Goal 3B to identify and advance internal and community social justice, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. On January 11th, City Council approved the amendments to the program's funding philosophy to create an emphasis on the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and encourage proposals that identify and foster inclusion, belonging, and social justice. This aligns with City Council adopted Resolution 2020-105, affirming the city's commitment to advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the city. Additionally, Council provided direction to allocate direct funding to Boys and Girls Club, Rianda House, and Up Valley Family Centers outside of the nonprofit grant program. By allocating direct funding to these three organizations, the overall funding available for the nonprofit community enrichment grant program was reduced to $120,000, with a maximum grant request of $20,000. The recommended funding modifications were made to keep the overall contribution at current levels of approximately $210,000, with $120,000 allocated to the grant program and $90,000 allocated to Boys and Girls Club, Rianda House, and Up Valley Family Centers for the upcoming funding year of $30,000 each. We have two items for consideration this morning. The first is the three nonprofit funding agreements. We have attached a draft nonprofit funding agreement that was prepared for Boys and Girls Club, Rianda House, and Up Valley, and is currently going through the review process. The agreements will provide funding for 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25. Based on previous council direction, staff is recommending the City Council authorize the city manager to enter into and execute a multi-year nonprofit funding agreement with these three entities in the amount of $30,000 each for a total of $90,000 per year, and for the city manager to authorize and accept any and all non-substantive amendments to the draft agreement that are deemed necessary to finalize the agreements. The second item that we're looking at is in regards to the nonprofit community enrichment grant program. On January 13th, staff posted the amended grant guidelines on the city's website, and applications were due February 18th. City staff received 20 applications requesting funding for a total request of $290,185, which exceeded the program estimated budget by $170,185. The City Council Working Group consisted of the mayor and vice mayor met with city staff to review the applications and made funding recommendations that are being presented to you today. Staff is seeking council feedback, discussion, and direction regarding the funding recommendations. And I am prepared to share my screen to go through the different asks and then the funding recommendations.
Thank you. So in terms of structure, and as we get into the two sort of sections, I'm just going through my staff report here, and in looking at the section for the three Rianda House Boys and Girls Club and Up Valley Family Centers. Do we need to separately move that one forward?
Yes, that would be the recommendation.
Okay, so in that case, I think we'll get a little council discussion and then open public comment on those three. That's my thought. Does that sound, if I look to our city manager, does that sound a way to structure this?
Yes, sir. I think that would be a fine way. We do have these separated, and there's background and history as Mandy explained. And so I think from just a time management standpoint, I think that makes sense to consider that first group and then take on the larger group.
Okay, very good. So we'll open up a bit of discussion on the first three. The reasoning from the city, and we can talk with Dr. Mitz and Ms. Kellogg as well as Vice Mayor Doring. We were all working on this group. This has been a discussion happening for the last few years. Rianda House, Up Valley Family Center, and Boys and Girls Club providing really core social services for the city in a consistent manner for many, many years. Having to come in for the same grant every year was becoming cumbersome for something that is so needed for the city. So this is a new way of looking at this that will give a little more consistency over time for these organizations to depend on this type of funding. As we said, this is for really core social services. Are there any thoughts from council on these items? I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. This makes sense to me, and I like to use the example with the Boys and Girls Club about how it used to be our responsibility to do the teen center and how the Boys and Girls Club took that on for us. And they really provide these services to our community on a different level. And it is so hard because we have amazing nonprofits in our community that do so much. And these three, to me, with the kind of services they do and how we partner with the city, it makes sense to me to do this.
Any additional council comments? I'm seeing none. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. I'm going to take this moment as being as good as any other for kind of a larger picture comment. I certainly agree that these particular nonprofits provide really important services. I have no difficulty with the recommendation, but I think it's really important to remind ourselves and the public that our current situation is one in which the city is committed to providing more services than we really have revenue to finance. So I think our funding challenges are much bigger than anything that can be attributed to COVID. They've been developing over a much longer period of time. And I think absent some significant change in our course or circumstances with respect to municipal revenues and expenses, we're headed for a real crisis. So just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional council comments? And seeing none, we'll go to public comment.
Maury, you can unmute yourself and address the council.
Hi, we're not able to see you, council members, mayor, and this is Julie Spencer with Rianda House, and I'm with Maury, our new executive director. Are you able to hear us?
Yes.
Great. We want to applaud the city for taking on this new relationship of deepening the support for the 3 different nonprofits that are offering programs year after year after year on behalf of enriching the community of all lifespan, of all ages. And I understand this is a big step for the city funding wise, and we appreciate the commitment the city wants to make in terms of strengthening the relationships within these programs and these nonprofits. Rianda House, Boys and Girls Club, and the Up Valley Family Center. So thank you very much. And we're an active partner, you know, however we can help in this process of, as you're deciding, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your work.
Is there additional public comments? I'm seeing from Up Valley Family Center.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that we are grateful to be included in consideration of this budget in recognition of the broad scope of services that we provide to local residents here. So thank you for considering us, and to piggyback off Julie, if there's anything additional that you need from us, please let us know.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the public comment. And are we seeing additional public comment?
There is none.
There is none. So we'll bring it back to the council. And I'm sorry, on my staff report, I'm scrolling up and I'm not finding, in terms of a motion, could you let me know what is needed here?
Yes, this is to authorize the city manager to execute the agreements, and then also authorize him to approve any non-substantive amendments to the agreements in order to finalize them.
On these 3 items.
That's correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Is there a, okay, there we go. In a second, please.
I'll second.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. And I'm seeing City Manager McCann.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. And thank you to our partners and providers. Outstanding stuff. I just wanted to pick up on Councilmember Hardy's comment. I know that same thought is on the mind of Councilmember Hall, and in fact, all of you. And that relates to our the difficult balance between our sources of funds and the uses of funds. This is a very special, at the same time difficult set of decisions before you. We are so fortunate to have so many partners that can take a modest amount of public funding and match that and leverage that and provide services to the community. These are services that we would undoubtedly otherwise not be able to provide. And I think that the council members' recognition of that challenge for us and that difficulty and that potential that we may not be able to do this in future is very real and something that we have to keep in the forefront. It was interesting, the staff told me that we had almost $400,000 worth of requests for about $200,000 of available funding. And so there's a lot of shaving and whittling and choices that have to be made. There's no doubt that as we present our budget recommendations to you in coming weeks, there'll be further decisions. And one of those decisions, I think, will be to follow up on the comment that Councilmember Hardy and Hall and others have made, which is to very aggressively address the gap that we find and to identify realistic sources of additional revenue for the city so that we can continue in this partnership with nonprofits, but also with the core and very essential services that the community desires. So Councilmember Hardy is right on. We've got great challenges and limitations. Fortunately, though, I think that we've identified a reasonable way to go forward in this coming fiscal year to keep our partners whole so they can provide the good work to the community. And we would recommend that you move forward with confidence that we'll be able to provide an outline to address our coming needs, but also needs farther into the future. So with that, maybe we can move on to the next section. And Mandy, you want to walk us through that?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. So as City Manager McCann said, in addition to the 90,000, we did get 290,185 in requests. And so I'm going to bring that up right now. And is this big enough for you? I can make it bigger. How does that look?
Can you go just a little larger with it?
Yes. How's that?
There we go.
Okay. So what we have here on the left-hand side is the nonprofit agency. We did include what funding they'd received in the prior year if they had received funding. Then we have their request for this current year and then the proposed funding. The proposed funding is totaling at $135,085. We are proposing $10,000 of that to come from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the remaining $125,085 would come from general fund. So I can just walk through each of them. We have Cafeteria Kids Theater. They requested $2,250. The proposed amount is $1,000. Then we have Cinema Napa Valley requested $20,000. The proposed funding is $2,500. Calabria Care requested $20,000 with proposed funding at $10,000. Friends of the Cameo requested $11,500 and the proposed funding is $8,250. Mentis requested $20,000. The proposed funding is $15,000. Napa County Bicycle Coalition requested $10,000 and the proposed funding is $5,500. Nimbus Arts requested $7,000 with a proposed funding of $5,000. Our Town St. Helena requested $20,000 with a proposed funding of $10,000. St. Helena Catholic Church requested $20,000 with proposed funding of $10,000. St. Helena Community Garden with $2,460 in request and a proposed funding of $2,460. St. Helena Cooperative Nursery with a request of $20,000 and proposed funding of $10,000. St. Helena's Farmers Market requested $10,775 with proposed funding at $8,775. St. Helena Fire Safe Council requested $10,000 with a proposed funding of $7,500. St. Helena Historical Society requested $20,000 with a proposed funding of $10,000. St. Helena Housing Coalition requested $30,000 with a proposed funding of $0. St. Helena Little League requested $20,000 with a proposed funding of $7,500. St. Helena Preschool for All requested $20,000 with proposed funding of $10,000. Sustainable St. Helena requested $5,000 and proposed funding of $4,000. The White Barn requested $9,200 and proposed funding of $2,600. And Up Valley Family Centers requested $12,000 for a proposed funding of $5,000.
Thank you. And I just want to circle back on the St. Helena Housing Coalition. There was a question in terms of how the application and the process was looked at. So that may inform that decision to some degree that we can discuss as we move forward here. In terms of looking at this, Mandy, is there anything else to add on this list?
No, it just that it did take a lot of consideration going through each of the quests to make sure that we kind of fell within the budget that we had outlined for this upcoming fiscal year.
Okay. Any comment here from council? I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Some of these requests, it looks like we're suggesting we give as little as 10% of the ask. Is there any value in doing that at all if we're already over our budget here?
One of the things that we talked about doing, and as we sort of directed where the funds went, we tried to identify parts of their ask that what we were directing the funds toward would cover a certain aspect of their ask. So there is a defined value, even if it's not as certainly as much as they had wanted. They would cover some aspect of what they were doing. So there was a way of looking at this that would provide some value. If Mandy or Dr. Mitz want to address that at all.
Yeah, when we reviewed the applications, each of them does submit a budget for what their project is set for, and they create line items for them. So we looked at some of these projects and said, okay, which line items would be reasonable to fund and which ones could they be doing on their own? And that's how we identified some of the costs there and why it does look lower on some than others.
Any other council comment or input here? Okay, with that then, we'll look to the public comment and see if there's public comment at this point.
Mandy, I need you to unshare your screen.
Oops.
One second. Rick, you can unmute yourself and address the council.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, council members. I believe you have before you an email I sent out yesterday setting forth our position of why we felt we should have been included. Adding insult to injury, we submitted as requested last year our proposal for funding on January 13th, 2021, and apparently it was lost in the spam filter. We were never considered last year, and obviously we're not being considered this year. We don't think there's equity in that at all. Thank you.
Thank you for the public comment. And as I mentioned, there'll be some discussion, or can be some discussion regarding that sort of process which led to that decision. So we'll look to additional public comment.
Kara, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Kara and I'm with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. And I just wanted to first and foremost say thank you so much for your time and consideration of our request. We're very excited about the prospect of continuing to build champions in St. Helena. We are wrapping up work on a previous grant and just finished a program evaluation of the crossing guard programs at the schools, and it was really with really favorable results. It's very positive in terms of parents thinking that it increases safety, as well as a real difference in mode shift. So more folks choosing to go to school by walking or biking because the crossing guards were there. And those came out of our, in part that program came out of our walk audit recommendations when we looked at each school and the barriers to safe routes to school. So we're very excited to continue the work in the way that it coincides with the goals of the city around health and climate. And we also just want to give a big thank you to staff for partnering with us this upcoming Friday, which is Bike to Work and School Day. And the Parks and Recs Department and David Johns will be having an Energizer station there. And we hope that all of you will join us between 7 and 9 by going by bike to your work or to your school that day. So again, thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. We'll look to additional public comment.
Tracy, you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me well?
We can.
Okay, great. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Tracy Rodriguez-Biggs. I'm the program manager for the Up Valley Village program via CollaboraCare. And I wanted to express our gratitude for being considered for this funding. We are very happy to continue the partnership within the city and continue to advocate for the older adults in our community. And we look forward to continuing this great work with all the wonderful entities in this community. So thank you again on our behalf and for our older adults.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Cambria, are you wanting to give another public comment?
Hi, yes, I just wanted to say, again, thank you on behalf of the family centers and full families for recommending this partial funding for our Niños Activos Children's Play Group. It's a very well-attended group and the kids really love it. And so we are thankful for your continued support there.
Thank you for the comment and the continued work. Additional public comment?
There is none.
There is none. So we'll bring it back to council. Is there any initial comment here or question by council? Excuse me. Seeing none, I'm seeing Councilmember Hall. Mute, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Mr. McCann for his earlier comments and also Councilmember Hardy. You know, I really like the idea of looking at our big three and just putting them on a regular contract to provide services to us. I think between the three of those nonprofits, they certainly check off a lot of boxes that are priorities for the city. They provide a broad range of services deep into our community, and I think it's terrific that we formalize that relationship. I am obviously really concerned about our financial condition, and we have to change the way we make decisions here. And to start our planning season with giveaways is problematic for me. So I like having the contract in place for these three. I'm not at all in favor of going over our budget by 1 penny on this. I wish this conversation was the last conversation in our planning effort here. I like the interest by our community. I think there's a lot of ways to address a lot of things. Preferably, I like putting the big items first. This is like the dessert. You know, none of us, I think, were trained to eat dessert before our main meal. And that's what we're doing by kicking off our planning season with this. So I would rather do our big items first, infrastructure and funding, and then look to what we have available to help others. We're in a sick financial condition and we have to tend to ourselves first. That's just how I view it. So I'm not really in favor of voting for anything beyond those three. Frankly, I'd like to see the funding increased slightly for those three because they provide such a broad range of services. And let's just put the rest on hold for a couple of years until we can figure out how we're going to dig ourselves out of this financial mess. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional council comments?
Thank you. I have an opinion, so I just wanted to speak up about that. I think that I understand what Councilmember Hall you're saying in terms of knowing our budget first. I hear that. And I also think that part of the reason we're hearing this now is because all of these nonprofits have put in so much work and planning for these programs. And there are some deadlines for that, for them figuring out whether they can do them or not. And we've had a system in place and a process with dates that they rely on. And this is part of that moving forward. I trust when I hear staff saying that we can't do a penny over what they're presenting. I hear that with between the lines when Mandy told us they've worked really hard on the budget to make this particular budget fit with all of the incredible challenges we are facing. I hear that. I too am very concerned about our city finances. And I think that all of these nonprofits in the community have also gone through incredibly difficult years with funding. And what we're able to do right now with leveraging these dollars that really are not as big as the reward that we'll get back for these essential services in our community. I want to move forward this year and be able to do this. And then we can have that conversation for next year and have it more upfront, where right now all of these nonprofits have already put in all of the time and all of the hard work with this application, and have the anticipation that we will fund this as much as we can, which is this budget that we have in front of us.
Thank you. I just, before I circle back to you, Councilmember Hall, I just want to see if there's any other council comment here at this point. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy, and then I'll come back, Councilmember Hall.
Yes, no, I agree with Councilmember Hall. I think as for the second part of the grant discussion, the item is out of order in the sense that we should be looking at this after we've wrapped our heads around the larger budget picture. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll look then to Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. And Councilmember Shuto, I very much appreciate your comments. These are difficult times for all of us. And my view is we just have to get our own books in order and put the big things first. The destruction of our infrastructure is not going to slow down. We can't control it. That's Mother Nature. It's collapsing regularly every single week. We don't have money for it. Not only that, we don't have money. I mean, we've got Chief Hartley sitting here. We don't have money for staff. We don't have money to unfreeze frozen positions. So the idea that we're going to kick off our planning season with trying to give money away while this same body is asking the community to give us $20 million just seems completely bizarre. So anyway, I think this whole thing should be flipped around the way we think about allocating funds, where they go, and this sequence of our conversation here at the council should be reversed. We should start with our CIP and figure out how are we going to fund it, and then see what are we going to do about our general fund.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Doring.
You know, I agree with the notion that we have to prioritize our funding, obviously, and that we have to look at the big picture. There's no question that we are hemorrhaging and we don't have enough revenue to support all the services that we want in the community. But there's another part of me that says that doing the work we're doing is actually a form of economic sustainability. Supporting families in our community is related to folks being able to go to their jobs, to do the things they want to do. I want to just add a little perspective here. Unlike probably many of you, I grew up in utter poverty, raised by a single mom, 6 children. And every dollar we got was not a giveaway. I would not be here today if we did not have the programs that we have in our community. And we have to get beyond the notion that we're giving handouts to people. We are giving a hand up to people so that they can contribute to our society, prepare themselves for better educations, prepare themselves to help their own families. This is a pittance of money we're talking about here, frankly. And I agree, it's not a binary decision in my mind. It's not one or the other. We definitely have to look at the big picture, but we have to have a bigger heart to help people. And when we went through these programs, we tried to connect it to our vision and our mission statements. How closely do they align? And we spent a tremendous amount of time trying to whittle it down and stay within a budget that's reasonable. All of these are important. All of these items are important for the community. Being able to have food in your belly makes you a better citizen, right? For me, that sort of that hard, cold exterior that we should just go to CIP first and leave these people out in the cold is wholly unacceptable in this community. We have the wealth in this community, and we're trying to help some of these nonprofits continue to do what they do best. And we need to keep that top of mind. We absolutely need to make sure that these nonprofits continue to be sustained. At the same time, we have to figure out ways to cut costs and increase revenues. So we can do both. I hope we consider doing both and not get bogged down in terms of the timing of these situations. You know, well, we should wait. These folks there are a lot of folks in our community who are desperate. And we need to pay attention to that.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall and then Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you, and thank you, Vice Mayor. I certainly feel your concern and appreciate it. I am not suggesting we leave anybody out in the cold here. Our job is to help our community be healthy long-term. What I've suggested is that we reverse the order of our decision-making. That's all I'm saying. Where's our 10-year forecast, right? We're going to have the chamber come before us pretty soon. I don't know when, and they're going to ask for $300,000 or $400,000 more. Where's the forecast that says we are headed in the right direction or not? So I don't like having a series of decisions where we are making funding commitments and using up available resources without understanding whether or not we can keep water coming into our kitchen sinks. And I'm sorry, that's just how I view it. The infrastructure is not going to stop. It's going to continue to collapse. And it costs a bloody fortune. It's millions and millions and millions, of course. I would love to sit here and be able to up our nonprofit grant program by 5-fold. That's the goal here, but we've got to solve the infrastructure issue first. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, well, and this is clearly a very difficult conversation. I'm not at all happy about the conclusion that I've reached, which is that in large or significant measure, the readily apparent wealth of this community, I think, has served to mask the looming fiscal crisis for the municipality. It's hard to take in these two seemingly contradictory aspects of the situation in St. Helena. There's a lot of wealth in the community, and the municipality is seriously underfunded in terms of revenue, and so the reason that I feel very strongly that the discussion is just in terms of the sequence of things that we take on out of order is because I believe our ability to provide services at all is at risk. And I do differ in terms of my sense of the immediate priority a bit from Councilmember Hall, in that what I think is most critical is actually our staffing, because without adequate personnel resources, we don't have the ability to administer or manage the kind of CIP projects that are on the very long, costly, and intimidating list that has accumulated. So I just feel it's really, really important that we have these conversations in public on an ongoing basis in which we are honest about the precarious reality of the city's financial condition. Another aspect of this that I think has served to, in some ways, mask the reality, and in other ways, honestly, I think we've confused ourselves in the public. It's with the sort of annual focus on a balanced budget, and the city is able to balance its budget every year. It balances the budget by a variety of means, which in leaner times involves losing staff positions to attrition and other matters. But we end up with a sort of positive report that's based on a balanced budget without comprehending the accumulation, not simply of unfunded capital improvement projects, but what I have for years been calling our administrative infrastructure. There is a huge cost to being understaffed, and it has accumulated and been accumulating for more than a decade, probably since at least the 2008 recession. To me, these are very big, very important concerns, and I'm really hoping that at a minimum we can all agree that we have to come to grips with our fiscal reality to avoid fiscal collapse. And I'm not, as those of you who know me well, I'm not at all prone to hyperbole or turning everything into a narrative of disaster or crisis. That's really not my style or personality. But as I have, in the course of this term on the council, incrementally taken in what's in front of us and why, I have reached that conclusion that things are really pretty stark. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing City Manager McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members. In particular, I'd like to thank Vice Mayor Doring for those very stirring words. I think it's important to understand what we're doing. What we're doing is government. We're providing services that are essential to folks. There's no doubt that we need to be very responsible about how we do that, and I think we're struggling with that. In my short 2.5 months with the city, it's become abundantly clear to me that our desires and needs greatly exceed our available resources. And so everybody's right. We're all right. We have a fortunate situation. We're presented with very qualified, experienced folks who have agreed to help us provide services. Every one of these outfits is either providing a service that our community desires that we, the city, are unable to provide, or they're supplementing a service and supplementing services by the city. So this is a way to address the service needs in an immediate and less expensive fashion. They are true partners and not feel-good stuff. While the order might be a little reversed, I don't see them as dessert. I see them sort of, as perhaps the last course of a budget cycle, but they're not frivolous. I see them as essential. I see them as instrumental to the services that we provide. Could I take a sharp pencil and go through and cut out some funds or even eliminate a provider or two? Absolutely. Would I have any joy in that? None. If you ask me to return with this at a different time, I certainly will. I can tell you I'm going to come back with a proposal that says $135,085 though. But I think all of these are important. I agree with you that the timing and the sequence could be better. I understand that. There's different motivation here. Some, as Councilmember Shuto suggested, there's some certainty for these groups. They're on shoestrings, as I'm sure you can understand. And so for them, that certainty is important. From my standpoint, I saw this as a continuation of the practices that the city has had. And while I know our budgetary difficulties, I see this as something that I would recommend and I will recommend. So it's not that it's a done deal or a no-brainer. It's difficult, but it just needs to fit in, I think, within our budgetary priorities. And from my standpoint, I see it in that fashion. We do have, I think, great opportunity to address these financial challenges. They are not going to be solved overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take a variety of instruments. I think there's a good parallel between our ongoing financial needs and the immediate steps, not immediate, but the steps that the council took relative to Measure H. The measure that the council, I think, correctly saw as necessary to bring to the voters, folks are considering it right now, that would supplement the otherwise available funds to the city so that we could address real infrastructure needs in a more rapid fashion. So in order to address those needs, there was a recognition that there's additional finances, additional revenue necessary, and the council asked the community to participate. That, I think, is a model for what we will be doing with respect to a long-range financial plan. It's to bring all of the demands that we see in the future, so not just this year or next year, but 10 years out or 15 years out, and identify financial tools, the opportunities that we have in a very fortunate environment that we're in here in St. Helena and in the Napa Valley, to identify revenue streams, both from new development, from better use of land, from fee structures, perhaps from tax measures, but there's a whole arsenal of tools that are available that I think the council can consider, and many of those will be practical and help us to address issues. Like Councilmember Hardy, I'm not an alarmist. I'm an extreme optimist, but also a realist. And I see challenges before the city, but I'm absolutely confident that those things are within the reach of decision makers and will be compelling to the community to participate in, both as tax measures, but also as opportunities to generate vitality, vibrancy, and economic growth in the community by using obsolete properties and encouraging key, critical, appropriately scaled development that can help us. So I think we have a bright future. I think the concerns are excellent. They're very real, but I think we have ways to address these things. I would suggest that you move forward with this today. If you're more comfortable waiting until we can package it all, that's fine too. I think that you're sending a strong signal to our partners that you support them, but you want to be convinced that we've got the funds. I'll ensure you that we will identify those funds so that we can move forward. So however you wish to proceed, we'll take that direction.
Thank you for that input. I just have a few comments. Oh, I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Well, I just wanted to thank the city manager for those comments. And if I sounded stern or got in a lecturing mode, that was not my intent. I totally recognize the economic sustainability situation that we're in. Recognize it since I got on the council in 2014, and every year it's gotten worse, frankly, in a systemic way. I just wanted to just make sure that when we're going through the priority phase and trying to figure out what are our most precious items that we need to fund, that we avoid either inadvertently or intentionally scapegoating certain classes of people. Because I know that's not our intent, but I worry about those kinds of things, and language matters to me. And we could pick out a lot of different things, police department, library, recreation, and go through that analysis and go, whoa, what are we doing here? Why are we funding that, right? And I don't want to come off as some sort of crazy liberal. I am very pragmatic. I probably am more familiar with these budgets than most on the council. You can see the problems articulated by council members Hall and Hardy. Clearly, they're there. But we're going to have to make some hard decisions as a community as to what we can fund. And I think both of our thoughts are legitimate. I have passion for people who are struggling. You have passion for sustainability, making sure that we can turn on the tap. Turning on the tap is a priority for me. I don't want to have any question about that, Councilmember Hall. I totally agree with you. Maybe this will be the council where we finally figure out this systemic funding issue that we have and try to come up with some ideas around that. So I apologize if I sounded stern. Yeah, I'll leave it at there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, and thank you, Vice Mayor. I appreciate your comments and feel the same way that these are issues that are very difficult for us. And if my language or use of certain words were off-putting, then I've done harm to myself in trying to have folks actually hear my message. So language is very important to me. I do, when I campaigned, just to step back, my campaign, even folks who worked on my campaign, I said my goal is that I didn't have any difference of opinion with any of the other candidates. I liked everybody's message. I want to accomplish everything that was on all of the other candidates' list. My only difference is simply an issue of priority. I want to make sure that we are here tomorrow so we can go through this list and add more money to it. That's my whole point. I don't view the numbers as a pittance. They're very real, particularly if I'm, Chief Sorensen or Chief Hartley or anybody else who's a director here. The numbers here are bodies that we need. This is staff. We have staff working hard, beating their head against the wall, frankly, exhausted through what's occurred over the past couple of years. And we've got to find a way to squeeze out some money. And the dollars that we're talking about are bodies that can help provide relief to the rest of our staff. So that's just how I view it. I think it's just an order of priorities. I think the way that, I think in better times, when we perhaps had a little more fat on the books, then this is a wonderful place to start the planning process. But we've got to get our eyes set out on the horizon, because it's, not to sound alarmist, but I'm very concerned that it's disappearing. We have to change the trajectory, and we have to, all of us, stare at what are we doing in the next 5 and 10 years? What's that look like? It takes us a whole heck of a long time because of the way government is structured. It takes us a long time to get money, to fund projects, to get those projects up and running and going. It takes years. Meanwhile, you guys know inflation is ripping right now, ripping. Our infrastructure cost is growing faster right now every year than our entire operating budget. That's not adding anything else to the list. That's letting life roll forward. So we're hanging on to a, tiger by the tail here. We've got to get anchored and at least get that long-term thinking in front of us. We keep talking about the idea of the opportunity of perhaps new development or using city assets. I think all of that's terrific. When are we gonna fill our empty buildings and get leasing? Why aren't we doing that? A year ago, we talked about that. It's never been queued up.
If I may interject, I just want to look to the city manager, this being a special meeting, and I get the relationship to talking about revenue as to these grants. I just want to make
issue. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're staying on track and not straying in an area in terms of the special meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Always good to keep track of those things. This is an agendized item. It relates to budgetary decisions, the comments relative to our ability to fund this and some of the causes and some of the potential remedies, I think, fall within the agenda discussion and the council's deliberations. So I think we're fine.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hall, I apologize for interrupting. I just want to make sure we're staying on track.
No, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I have a tendency to ramble at times. So I'm not sure I had anything else to add to it other than my message, I guess, is we've got to spend more time here when this body meets on talking about how are we paying for this stuff. That's the issue. How are we paying for it? Our long-range financial forecast done a year ago was horrifying to look at. I mean, it's worse than I ever imagined. And today it's even worse than that. And we've got inflation now that's out of control. And where's our brainstorming in our planning process? Where's a council subcommittee that's identifying other needs and other ideas that we'd like? Maybe that's coming up in some other workshops. I'm not sure. But the fact that we're somewhat prohibited through Brown Act from, sitting on my living room floor here and scratching out ideas in our blue jeans and coming up with things, how are we going to rebuild our town? That's what I'd like to get to. And we keep running through agenda items and making decisions without seeing that full picture and without having an agreement on where are we going as a community. Anyway, those are my points.
Thank you. And seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Vice Mayor Doring for his comments earlier. In the sort of my mental short list of essential services, providing for the needs of those who are least able to provide for themselves is pretty high. But I also, as soon as I think about that, I'm reminded that with respect to water, as an example, you know, all of the challenges that we face delivering water, again, you know, when we come up short there, when we have to raise our water rates to pay for the costs of fixing the water infrastructure, you know, that utility rate burden falls hardest on those with the least income. The concerns just are pervasive, I think. But I also very much appreciate the comments from City Manager. I heard that message loud and clear. I'm prepared to support moving on staff's recommendation today, but I am adamantly with Councilmember Hall in the urgency of getting a grip on the larger picture. And I think it is absolutely essential that in these public conversations, we are rigorously honest with each other and with the community about the true nature of our fiscal situation, because we have to have something like an agreement about the underlying facts before we can have a productive conversation with the community about our options for increasing revenue. The truth of the matter is, at the present time, we don't have anything like a core vision shared between council and community as to how we move forward. And in fact, we're rather polarized in a way that has made many of the particular discussions about particular projects or possibilities dysfunctional. We've been, in many ways, politically paralyzed when it comes to addressing these core fiscal issues. And so I believe the essential first step is for the council to be consistently realistic in talking about the state of the city's finances. If we can do that, if we can together in a unified fashion stick to the facts about our finances, then we have at least the possibility of making progress on a solution. But if we don't take care of that first step, we will not make real progress on a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional council comment here? I have a few thoughts. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, and then I will be quiet. And thank you, Councilmember Hardy. I agree. I just believe our planning should begin with an agreement on the council as to our long-term financial condition. That's it. What is that context? And do we thoroughly understand it? And then that sets the context by which all other funding and budgeting decisions are made, because we're in an agreement on where we are going. And we're not doing that here. What we're doing is we're jumping right in to let's make a decision here on one item without even any understanding of the bigger picture or any agreement on the broader picture. That's the problem for me. It's almost impossible for me. I mean, every cell in my body says, don't make a decision today because we are shutting ourselves out of options. And until we get into the conversation about where we are going as a community, how fast do we want to get there? How can we responsibly make these one-off decisions in the meantime? That's my point. That's why I was suggesting things like, why don't we put this at the back of this process? And to Manager McCann's comments, I completely agree as well, Jim. I think you said it very, very well. This is a lot about essential services. That's not my point. My point is simply the sequence of our decision making. We don't know what our ledger says, and yet we're writing checks. We have to stop and look at the whole ledger and say, where are we? How much room do we have to write checks, and in what direction? And we don't have any agreement on that. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. I've got a few thoughts here. Certainly in recognizing issues, revenue issues, staffing issues, CIP issues, critical that we recognize funding coming in, going out. And that discussion, I think, as we move into our budget, that's where we need to be talking. We've got tools, our long-range forecast, the financial diagnostic. A few years ago, we reached out to the League of Cities, had Michael Coleman work with us to help us understand some sort of baseline look at our city, benchmarking against other cities. We have some tools. I think as we're seeing, the deeper we can get into that as soon as possible, I think is critical. In terms of funding these grants, one of the things that a small city, in terms of capacity for what we can do, what we can offer in terms of services, is limited, and that is why we depend on these nonprofits. And if we want to change the way we structure that to have that discussion later in the budget cycle, I think that's a valid conversation, but it would happen for next year because I think everybody understands that this is the current model we have. And I don't think that it would be, I'm not sure if the word fair is right, but it just would present something different from what folks were expecting for this year. So I think there can be an opening for looking at how we do this next year in terms of where it falls. But these organizations are also depending on funding coming in a certain time for their budget. So I believe it's a reasonable amount that we can work with. And then the benefits that come from this type of funding, we see as, to use a trite saying, but it takes a village. It certainly does. And certainly during the emergencies, everybody in all these different aspects stepped up and helped keep the wheels and the gears moving. These are all the different gears and wheels that we want to keep moving. So while I recognize the larger discussion on revenue, the larger discussion on timing of when we do this, if we recognize that this is something that's important that we want to do, that's a process we already put in place, I think we should follow through with it certainly this year. And then if we want to revisit the timing for next year, that's the way I would suggest we do it. That's my thought. I'm ready to support this, move this forward, and then open up those other discussions. That's where I am on this. So with that, unless there's additional council comment, I'd be looking for a motion regarding this aspect of what we're talking about today.
Mayor, do you think we need to have a little bit more additional discussion on the Housing Coalition request? I don't know if anyone has issues. It was quite ambiguous, the application itself and what the ask was. As stated, and maybe you could pull up that application, but it was unclear to me what the request for the $30,000 was to be used for. It said to convince, and I'm paraphrasing, convince the city that Adam Street should be used for affordable housing. So I didn't see that as making sense to me, frankly, to give money to this coalition for that purpose. And that would be the reason that at least I did not support that application. But I certainly, it's not intended to suggest that I don't support housing in St. Helena or even on a portion of Adam Street. I think we need to continue the dialogue with this organization, maybe get together with them after this meeting, over the next month, and try to fine tune what it is that they need so that there's not this feeling of lack of equity or being dismissed in some form or fashion. So those are my comments there. I don't know if others have similar comments, but I didn't want to leave that one left unsaid. I just had a real difficulty figuring out what it was they wanted to do with the money. So thank you.
My suggestion on that was going to be as well that group comes and meets with the grant writing team or the grant teams to better understand how to put in these applications so that their needs can be met. That was going to be my suggestion as well. Mandy, any thoughts on that sort of connectivity?
Yes, that's correct. When we looked at the application, it just didn't meet the parameters that are outlined in the funding guidelines, and that's why it wasn't recommended for funding. But we're more than happy to meet with any potential applicant to review their application as they're preparing it and make recommendations to move it forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I think City Manager McCann.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have an opportunity to meet with the group some weeks ago to hear a little bit about their history and their interest in building and providing affordable housing. It does seem more like a sequencing, question about finding a site, obtaining consent from the property owner, those types of things, and then having a conversation with the city about a potential partnership. The Adam Street site is one that we've discussed, or the City Council has discussed on numerous occasions, and most recently in conjunction with our housing opportunity sites. The City Council said that some portion of it could very well be a suitable location for a housing project. And so I think just some conversation and help to identify appropriate steps so that maybe in a future funding cycle, they may be more suitable and a more compelling request. So I'd be happy to help with that.
Thank you. Any other council comments?
I just wanted to also say that I'd be happy to sit in Council Member Hall's living room on the floor if he would so have it, and we can do that anytime.
You're always welcome.
Okay, so we're at, I think I've asked to see if there's a motion here on moving this item forward.
What is the motion that's necessary?
The motion would be to approve the funding recommendations as outlined in the staff report.
So moved.
I will second.
And a roll call, please.
Vice Chair Doring,
Yes.
Councilor Chateau,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. That's our item for today. Thank you, everybody, for the focus and all the good input, and we'll keep working together and look for solutions to our issues in a collaborative way. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you at the, I'm seeing City Manager McCann.
Sorry to extend this, but thank you very much. Just want to thank the council for an excellent discussion. I very much appreciate your candor and honesty. And I will assure you that your comments have been heard. They resonate very much with me and with the staff. The work that we bring forward to you relative to budget will reflect ideas to address these points, and I fully expect we'll have a full-throated conversation about those things. And I suspect at the end, just like this, you'll make a decision, provide direction that will very much benefit the community and will reflect the values that you each bring and that are reflected in the council's vision and immediate work plans. So we'll work on those things. So I thank you very much for this very good conversation.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. And I do also want to make sure to put our thanks to Dr. Mitz and Ms. Kellogg for all the focus and work on this. Really, really good work. So thank you. So with that, we'll adjourn and see everybody at our next meeting.
Bye.